My name is Max, and I don't know exactly when things went wrong. All I ever wanted was to be noticed, not to become a superstar, not to land a $1 million contract, not to grace the cover of a magazine. I just wanted someone to leave a like, to say, "Hey, you're cool, keep it up," or maybe even follow me. In a world where attention is currency and recognition can be earned through a meme, a stunt, or a moment of sincerity, I chose what seemed like the easiest path. Filming videos, joining trends, doing challenges, even the absurd ones. I never thought of it as shameful. I was 17, living in a dull suburb where each day was a copy of the last, and my attempts to become somebody online were the only way I could escape the grey monotony, where even school lunches were scheduled a year in advance. It all started with TikTok. I made a video where I danced on the roof of a garage in the rain to a song that was trending at the time. It got 24 likes. For some people that's nothing, but to me, it was real attention. Someone even commented, "You're an idiot, but a funny one." I remembered that comment better than any grade I'd ever received. At the time, I had no idea that sometimes you pay for likes with parts of yourself. I didn't know that attention could be poisonous, and that fame was a deceptive illusion behind which the most cynical players hide. At my school, there was a trio everyone knew, not because they were especially smart or kind, but because they had a YouTube channel with over 1 million subscribers. Danya, Vika, and Gleb. They made pranks, reviews, tested weird food, and even got teachers to participate in embarrassing challenges. Their energy was infectious, their charisma undeniable, and their popularity absolute. Even the school principal pretended not to mind them filming in the hallways, just to avoid conflict. Vika was the face of the channel. Bright, beautiful, with perfect speech, and a strange kind of charm that made most of the boys lose their breath. Danya was the brain. Editor, writer, a charismatic manipulator who knew how to sell any story to the audience. And Gleb. Gleb was the quiet cameraman who rarely spoke, but seemed to see more than anyone else. When they first spoke to me, I thought it was a joke. Me, the same Max who couldn't even get 100 followers, being invited to join them? It felt like winning a ticket to another life. "You're funny," Vika said, laughing. "You've got your own style. You're not afraid to look silly. That's cool." I blushed, didn't know what to say, and just nodded. Danya added, "We need a new face, something fresh. Let's try working together. Maybe you'll like it." I didn't realize that behind those words was a calculation, and that "let's try" really meant "let's use you." The first video I appeared in came out a week later. They invited me to a ridiculous challenge. Who could stay in a freezer with ice cream and salt for the longest? It was stupid, weird, but we laughed, screamed, and acted like it was all fun. The video got 100,000 views in 3 days. The comments were divided. "Max is crazy but kind of funny," and "what an idiot. Let's see what he does next." I couldn't tell if they were insulting or praising me, but the attention was addictive. Vika encouraged me. "You're part of the team now. If you want, we'll give you your own segment." With each new video, the stakes got higher. They had me eat bizarre things, staged traps, filmed fake pranks where paint accidentally fell on me or I fainted from shock. Laughter, likes, comments, thumbnails with my face frozen in dumb expressions. I started realizing I was becoming a meme, but a part of me still hoped it was just temporary. That one day I'd show them I was smart, interesting, that I could speak seriously. I was wrong. One day I offered them an idea for a video, a documentary about how teens feel pressure from social media. Danya laughed and said, "You? A documentary? No, bro, you're the clown. Be who you already are." His words hit me like cold water, but I still clung to the hope that they'd change. Gleb gave me a strange look that day, like he wanted to say something but didn't. The breaking point came when they suggested a radical experiment to supposedly make me live on the streets for a day without money or a phone to see how a modern teenager would cope without tech. In reality, they left me alone in an industrial zone, filming from afar as I struggled to find food, a place to sleep, and begged strangers for help. It wasn't just humiliating, it was dangerous. I froze, had a panic attack. When they finally found me and took me back, Vika joked, "Now we've got the teaser clip. Teenager in real danger." That night, I realized I wasn't just being used. I was being erased. They were stripping away my identity, turning me into a walking stereotype. I tried to talk to them. I said I didn't want to do this anymore, that it wasn't funny. Danya smirked. "You think anyone's going to watch you without us? You're our character, Max. Don't like it? We'll find another." I left that night feeling like someone had ripped me out of my own dream and thrown me under the bus. The next few days, I didn't go to school. My feed was flooded with memes of my face. Screenshots, clips, GIFs, me yelling, falling, making a fool of myself. I couldn't leave the house. I lied to my parents and told them I was just tired. They never took my online stuff seriously anyway. They thought it was just a phase. And I, sitting in the dark, realized for the first time what it meant to be an object, not a person. But something inside me wouldn't let me give up. Maybe because I felt that if I stayed silent now, they'd just do it to someone else. Maybe because I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't just a joke. I was a person, and I had one last card left, the truth. And so I opened my laptop. I started collecting fragments, old messages, script drafts, screenshots where they talked about how to make me even dumber for more virality. I found recordings that had accidentally been saved, where Vika and Danya discussed how to edit clips so the audience would feel sorry for him, but still laugh. I watched those pieces come together, and I felt colder with each passing moment. Every clip felt like a revelation, as if I was finally learning to see the world where I'd just been a pawn. I decided I would tell everything, not for revenge, not for likes, for myself, to get my voice back, a voice I never truly had. My hands were shaking when I uploaded the first video to my own channel. It wasn't edited. It wasn't a prank, not a provocation. Just me, sitting on the floor of my room, no lights, no smile, no mask that I had to wear for the last few months. I started with something simple. "Hi, my name is Max, and maybe you know me. But not the real me." I didn't need an explosive intro. No music, no dramatic titles could convey what was boiling inside. I told everything exactly as it happened, without yelling, without blame, without drama. Just the facts. How I was invited for fun, how my ideas were ignored, how every video I appeared in was edited to make me look as ridiculous as possible. I showed screenshots, audio clips, even behind-the-scenes moments I had accidentally saved. I spoke about how behind the funny videos was psychological pressure, manipulation, and exploitation. I didn't ask for pity. I just asked to be heard. Maybe for the first time in my life. When I hit publish, I felt nothing. No fear, no relief, no hope. I was just drained. Almost instantly my phone started vibrating. Notifications, comments, alerts. At first there were only a few. 1 or 2 people wrote, "You're lying. They would never do that." Some laughed. "Oh, look, another salty guy trying to get attention." But within a few hours there were others. I always felt something was off about how they showed you. This really hits different. Max, stay strong. I never thought something that funny could be hiding so much cruelty. And then, someone from their fan base made a reaction video to mine, breaking everything down. They compared clips, pointed out strange editing tricks, highlighted how my image had been artificially shaped. That was the first sign. The wave was beginning. The next day, my video hit trending. It gained more views than any of my previous ones, even more than the ones where I did humiliating stunts and laughed on cue. But unlike those, the comments here weren't a stream of jokes. These were real conversations. People were debating, discussing, sharing their own stories. Some said they too were edited to look foolish on camera. Others spoke of being bullied at school and how my words echoed their pain. Some simply said, "I believe you." Thank you for having the courage. I sat there reading everything until my eyes blurred with fatigue. I didn't even realize that for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid to read the comments under my own video, and that's when their response started. Danya posted a story. Some people can't handle attention and start talking nonsense. It's sad, really. Vika uploaded a blog post saying she didn't want to get into drama, but that this was just manipulation from a bitter teenager who couldn't take a joke. Gleb, he stayed silent. As always, their fans were split. Some defended them fiercely, accusing me of making it all up. Others began asking questions. Why didn't they ever show Max speaking for himself? Why were his solo ideas always cut? Why did they delete old videos with him? The more they tried to explain, the more hollow they sounded. People began noticing how unnatural their defenses looked. 2 days later, they released a full-length rebuttal video, polished, scripted, recorded in a studio, with perfect lighting and carefully curated expressions. They claimed it was all part of the show. Everyone agreed to everything in advance. Max just couldn't handle the pressure. I watched it and didn't recognize them. These weren't the people I'd once eaten pizza with after shoots or shared dreams with behind the scenes. These were performers, reading lines, protecting a business, not relationships. I didn't plan to respond. But then the messages started coming in. My followers, now numbering in the thousands, were asking, "Why aren't you saying anything? Is there more? Don't let this slide." I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. I made my second video, more composed this time, filled with facts, analysis, expert opinions I found online, psychologists, media analysts, people who specialized in manipulation through content. I didn't shout, I explained, I showed, I proved. I wasn't trying to destroy their careers, I wanted them to be accountable, but once again, their response wasn't reflection, it was escalation. This time, they threatened me. When the second video went viral, I received strange messages. Anonymous accounts left comments like, "Delete it or we'll expose your DMs where you begged to be on the show." Someone sent me an old edited clip where I jokingly said, "I'll do anything to get famous," taken completely out of context. They were trying to make me doubt myself, and I almost gave up. But then something happened. My followers started standing up for me. People made videos defending me. Some created entire breakdowns, debunking the fake screenshots. Others exposed how voice deepfakes and AI tools had been used to generate false confessions. I wasn't just being believed, I was being protected. I was no longer fighting alone. And then came the biggest twist, one I didn't see coming. One of their former collaborators, a guy who appeared on their channel 2 years ago and then vanished, posted his own video. He confirmed my story, said he was cut off after disagreeing with their tactics, that they used guilt, pressure, and behind-the-scenes threats to silence dissent. That Vika once told him, "Don't ruin the vibe with your deep thoughts. We're here to entertain, not think." That video exploded. Suddenly, everything I'd said became part of a much larger truth. This wasn't just about how they broke me. It was about a system, a format, built on exploiting the vulnerable for laughs and views. And I no longer felt like a victim. I felt like someone who had finally been heard. When I uploaded the third video, I didn't feel fear, only exhaustion. It wasn't physical fatigue, but something deeper, chronic, like I had been holding my breath for too long and finally let it out. In that video, for the first time, I didn't try to convince anyone. I didn't defend myself or seek sympathy. I simply laid out everything I had gathered, arranged the facts into a clear timeline, and narrated them in a steady, neutral voice. But that only made it all more striking. The video opened with a plain title screen, no music. How to create a hero to break him. I showed raw, unreleased footage, rough cuts, behind-the-scenes moments, candid audio where you could hear their real voices, their swearing, their laughter, Danya saying, "We need him to mess up. It's funnier that way." I included a shot of myself after filming, sitting on the floor, looking completely drained, unaware the camera was still rolling. I played an audio clip of Vika laughing on the phone, saying, "Max doesn't even realize how we're using him. It's pure gold." Even though the audio quality was rough, the message was clear. What I went through wasn't just accidental. It was a strategy. I spoke without emotion because that calmness had become my sharpest weapon. When they tried to paint me as hysterical or mentally unstable, my quiet voice sounded louder than their shouting. This video was different from the others because I wasn't just talking about myself anymore. I talked about the culture of cruelty, about how entertainment often disguises itself in someone else's suffering, about how easily audiences get drawn into charisma and charm, not noticing how real people are being bent and broken behind the scenes. I didn't accuse, I showed. And at the end, I asked one question. What if it's you next? I didn't expect how fast and hard this would land. The video hit trending within 6 hours, and by evening, my subscriber count had doubled. It was strange watching the numbers climb without feeling excitement or pride. It didn't feel like success. It felt like a warning. The higher you rise, the louder the applause might be. And the harder the fall. Their reaction came quickly. Danya was too smart to remain silent. I watched him try to calculate each move, trying to retain what was left of their audience. And then they dropped a video, not just an attack on my credibility, but a declaration of war. The title, "The Real Max, No Censorship." The thumbnail was a freeze frame of my face from one of their old pranks, where I looked idiotic. Poor lighting, awkward expression, clearly chosen to make me look ridiculous from the very first glance. I played the video, though I knew I shouldn't. It became obvious within seconds. They'd gone all in. They showed my old private messages taken out of context, edited voice notes where I, exhausted from filming, mumbled, "Do whatever. Just don't make me look like trash." They even showed comments I had left on their channel months earlier, things like, "You guys are amazing," using them to say I was lying. Now, the video wasn't a defense. It was a calculated destruction of my image. They pointed not to facts, but to weaknesses, repackaged as betrayals. See, he always wanted the fame. See, he always begged to be on camera. See, he's manipulating you. I turned it off and sat in silence. No panic, no anger, just a strange stillness, like watching a building collapse that you tried to hold up with your bare hands. I realized this was the moment of truth. Either I back down and disappear from the internet, from life, from myself, or I respond in a way I never have before. But not on their terms, not with outrage or counterattacks. I needed to fight a different way. So I opened an old notebook, a journal I hadn't touched since childhood, and started to write. Not a rebuttal, not a script, just a letter. I began from the very start, From the moment I first realized I wanted to be noticed. I described standing at the blackboard in elementary school, hands shaking, just hoping not to mess up. Reciting a poem in 5th grade better than anyone, only to be mocked because my voice trembled. Trying to make friends in every group that didn't want me. I described the nights I spent alone with just the glow of the screen, my only comfort. The first time I turned on a camera and couldn't even say a word. The hours it took me to work up the courage to hit publish. This wasn't a complaint. It was a record of how a person like me ends up becoming the perfect target. The next day I uploaded this text as a video. I simply read it aloud. No edits, no effects, no visuals except the words scrolling slowly on the screen. I didn't try to convince anyone. I didn't name names. I just gave people a chance to see me not as a meme or a character, but as a real person. And suddenly, the audience changed. Not just the people involved in the drama, completely new viewers started arriving. Not from curiosity, but from recognition. The comments were long, honest, painful. I thought I was the only one who felt this way. You just told my story. Thank you for being honest. This was no longer a fight. This was a reflection, a connection, something deeply human. And that's when they panicked, because they couldn't fight this version of me. This wasn't a Max they could mock or twist or silence. This was someone who had stopped playing their game. Someone who no longer needed to win, because he had already reclaimed his voice. I didn't know what their next move would be, but I expected it to be harsh. Not just another jab at my reputation or an attempt to paint me as a bitter crybaby. I anticipated something bigger, more calculated, possibly even involving people beyond their trio. I felt it in my bones, the way you feel a storm long before the sky turns. And still, what came next caught me off guard. One evening, while scrolling aimlessly, trying to quiet the noise in my head, someone sent me a link. It was a new video on their channel. The title was simple: The Truth About Max. Uncensored. The thumbnail was a freeze frame of me from one of their most humiliating challenges, my mouth open, face distorted, mid-reaction, a carefully chosen image designed to make viewers feel second-hand embarrassment before the video even began. I clicked it, though I knew I shouldn't. The video was their most aggressive move yet. They presented old messages, cherry-picked voice notes, edited clips, anything that could cast doubt. They showed a message I had once sent Vika late at night, exhausted, saying something like, "Do whatever you want, just don't make it look totally pathetic." They painted this as proof that I knew everything was fake and agreed to the humiliation. They showed public comments I'd left on their older videos, saying how much I appreciated the opportunity, using it to argue that I had loved the attention all along. It wasn't a defense, it was an execution, not based on facts, but carefully packaged to make me seem untrustworthy, attention-seeking, inconsistent. The comments under the video exploded within hours. Some were obviously bots, repeating phrases like, "He's fake," "He just wants clout," "He agreed to everything." Others were confused followers who didn't know what to believe. I turned the video off and stared at the ceiling. There was no fear, no panic, just a kind of stillness, as if I were watching someone dismantle a house I had built with my bare hands. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't fight them on their terms anymore. No more reacting to their provocations. No more playing defense. If I was going to finish this, I had to do it on my own terms, my own truth. I messaged Gleb. We hadn't spoken beyond a few cryptic texts since he sent me those early files, but now I needed more than fragments. I wrote to him, "If you really want this to end, I need your words." Hours passed. Then a reply. "Are you sure? If I speak, I'm done." I said I didn't want to ruin his life, only that I couldn't carry this alone anymore. He didn't respond. The next day he called. His voice was quiet, hesitant. He paused often, searching for the right words. He told me the truth I had suspected but never fully grasped. Their channel wasn't just 3 friends messing around. It was a business. There were producers, sponsors, contracts, real money, real pressure. When I joined, Danya immediately saw me as a format, a fresh way to reinvent their content, to create a recurring fool character who would make their other content look even better. Vika liked the idea because viewers love someone who looks out of place next to the cool ones. And Gleb had been too afraid to speak. He told me he had wanted to leave months ago but was bound by contracts, NDAs, the fear of being sued. "You think you're the only one they used?" he said. "They break everyone, even themselves. It's a machine, run on emotion, humiliation, and the audience's appetite for pain." His words weren't angry. They were tired, like someone who'd held a secret for too long. I recorded the call, not to use against him, but because I knew someone else needed to hear this. At first I didn't know whether I should release it. I didn't want to destroy Gleb's career or force him into the public eye, but then I realized if I didn't show people how the system worked, they'd keep doing this. Maybe not to me, but to someone even more vulnerable. So I made another video. Not a takedown, not an attack, a story, a system breakdown, a slow, patient, quiet explanation of how content like theirs is made, how people are turned into characters, how the audience unknowingly fuels the machine. I included parts of my conversation with Gleb, anonymized, with his voice filtered and name removed. I showed documents, emails, messages, production outlines. I explained how their scripts evolved around humiliation. I kept my voice steady. No anger, just clarity. That video changed everything. Reactions came fast. Some viewers shared it with captions like, "Finally, the curtains pulled back." Other creators started responding. Some said, "I've been in a shoot like this." Others said, "This happened to my friend." People began connecting dots, and the trio, they panicked. Vika released a video crying, saying, "Max is ruining our lives." Danya, on the other hand, took the offensive. He started using legal threats, public statements about defamation, claiming they'd sue me for everything. But this time, the public didn't buy it. Comments flooded in. "Why are you threatening someone if you've done nothing wrong? If he's lying, why does it sound more human than your rehearsed responses?" Then the real pressure started. Someone left a note at my door. "Stop before it's too late." I got calls from unknown numbers, messages sent to my parents. "Your son is destroying people's careers." It was no longer just about followers and videos. Someone, maybe one of their investors, maybe someone higher up, wanted me to stop. For days I couldn't sleep. I paced my room, thinking, should I stop? Should I delete everything? Should I disappear? And then I remembered every message I got from strangers. "Thank you for saying what I couldn't. You made me feel seen. You told my story." I realized this wasn't about whether I'd win. It was about not walking away. I contacted 2 independent journalists who had been following the story. I handed over everything, not for clout, not for revenge, for documentation. I told them, investigate. And they did. A week later, the first article dropped. It wasn't on my side. It was neutral, factual, thorough, but it confirmed everything. The scripting, the contracts, the manipulation, the threats. Suddenly, my story wasn't drama. It was a case. Danya tried to recover. He did a podcast interview. He looked tired, annoyed, impatient. He kept dodging questions. The audience didn't like it. The comments were brutal. "He's not even trying to lie well anymore." He doesn't get that the world's changed. And for the first time, I felt something new. Not victory, not triumph, but silence. And in that silence, peace. Because this wasn't just a fight anymore. It was a shift. And somewhere in the middle of that quiet, I understood. The last move would be theirs. But I was ready. When it was all over, there was no relief, no rush of emotion, no feeling of triumph or victory. Only silence, thick, dense, stretching out like fog, the kind that settles when you stop running and just stand still, trying to understand where to go next. I walked out of the courtroom without looking back, and for the first time in all these months, I felt how silence could sound louder than all the shouting, accusations, likes, dislikes, comments, and exposes. Inside me, there was no anger, no joy, no fear. There was something else, clarity, fragile, but real. It felt like I had been stumbling across a frozen lake, unsure whether each step would hold, and now I had finally reached solid ground. I understood that this story would stay with me forever, like a scar, not one that hurts, but one that can never be erased. I knew that many people would remember me, not as the guy who danced on rooftops for attention, but as the one who stood up, who became the face of someone else's pain, who spoke when it was easier to stay silent. But I also knew this wasn't my identity, not my curse or my crown. This was a path I walked through, painfully, completely, and I came out the other side. A few days later, I opened my laptop just to sit in the quiet. For once, there was no pressure. I didn't feel like I had to say anything. No one was breathing down my neck. I wasn't trying to protect myself or prove a point. For the first time, I had complete freedom. And that freedom was terrifying, because when fear is gone, what's left is a strange emptiness, a space you have to fill with something else. I thought for a long time about whether to keep the channel. Should I keep posting? Should I keep talking? I was scared that if I turned the camera back on, it would all come back. The scrutiny, the expectations, the endless analyzing of every word and breath. But then I realized I didn't have to go back. I could start from a different place. Not for the audience, for myself. I recorded a short video, no intro, no editing. I sat at my desk and said, "This was a journey. And it's over. But something new begins." I didn't explain what. I didn't lay out a plan. I just wanted to let everyone who had walked with me know. I wasn't disappearing. But I also wasn't clinging to the past. I was letting it go, not in denial, but with respect. Like something that shaped me but no longer defined me. And people understood. The comments were softer now, calmer. No more fire or fight. Just support. People wrote, "You gave us a lot, now go live." Someone even wrote, "You don't have to be a hero anymore. You can just be you." Weeks passed. The channel got quieter. I stopped making exposés. I stopped replying to bait. I began sharing other things, quiet thoughts, short stories, observations, no drama, no numbers, just honesty. Some videos barely got seen, some caught attention. But I stopped checking stats, because I knew, even if it all disappeared tomorrow, I'd still be here. Whole. As for them, Vika, Danya, and Gleb, their story lingered for a while. Some people defended them, others hated them, most just moved on. Their channel faded. Subscribers left. Sponsors cut ties. Videos were removed. Vika started a personal blog about mental health. Danya vanished for a while, then tried to return in a softer tone. Gleb. He simply disappeared. And I didn't judge. I didn't seek revenge. Because we all paid a price. Some lost their voice, some lost their image, some lost themselves, and no one came out unchanged. One evening, I got an email from an anonymous address. It only said 2 lines. "I was part of it too. I'm sorry. I hope you're really living now." No name. No signature. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I closed the laptop, walked outside, and kept walking. The city breathed around me like nothing had ever happened. People laughed, argued, rushed to their lives. The world kept turning, and I was a part of it again. Not as a symbol, not as a target, not as a character, just as someone who made it through. Maybe that's what this story taught me most. That truth isn't something you win, it's something you survive, something you carry. And if you live through it fully, without shortcuts, without edits, without filters, you're not the same afterward. And that's the real ending. Not in a headline, not in a courtroom, not in a viral post, but in a quiet moment where you breathe, feel your own weight again, and realize you're still here, still whole, still free. There was no grand finale. No music swelling, no standing ovation, no moment where I raised my hands and shouted, "I did it!" Instead, there was stillness, quiet, honest, and a little unfamiliar. Everything had already happened. The story had unfolded in full, with all its humiliations, confrontations, breakdowns, and revelations. The world didn't end, and neither did I. I simply kept living, not as a headline or a victim or a viral moment, just as someone who had walked through fire and come out the other side without forgetting who he was before it all began. And maybe that was the most important thing. I didn't shut down the channel, but I also didn't force it to stay alive. Some days I posted thoughts, quiet, small, personal. Sometimes I disappeared for a week and no one seemed to mind. The pressure was gone. No more numbers. No more fear of being edited, quoted, judged. I had told the story I needed to tell. It didn't belong to me anymore. It belonged to everyone who saw themselves in it. People still wrote me. Some told me I saved them. Some just said, "Thank you." And some wrote nothing at all, just a single emoji, or a dot, or a blank space that said more than any words ever could. I never answered Vika's last message. It was short. She said, "You were right." I read it and let it sit there, unread in my mind, like a closed book I didn't need to reopen. I didn't hate her. I didn't hate Danya. I didn't even hate the system that made them believe they had to be that way. I just didn't want to live inside that structure anymore. I wanted a life that didn't depend on how many people were watching, a voice that didn't need to be filtered through an algorithm to matter, a silence that wasn't loneliness, but peace. Sometimes people asked me in interviews, "Would you do it all again?" And I never answered yes or no, because the truth is, I don't know. I don't want to go back, but I wouldn't trade what I've learned for anything. I know now how fragile attention is, how easily people become symbols, how quickly cruelty becomes content. But I also know that truth has a texture. It may not trend, it may not always feel good, but it stays. It stays when the noise fades, when the lights dim, when no one's watching anymore. I remember one night, not long after everything had calmed, I sat by the window and looked out at the city. The lights flickered. People moved like shadows in the warm dusk, and I thought, this is it. This is what they can't take. Not my words, not my face, but this feeling that I am here, that I am still me, that I have nothing left to prove. I smiled, not for the camera, not for the audience, not for validation, just because I could. And maybe that's the ending I never knew I needed. No twist, no punishment, no triumph, just stillness, just breath, just life. Months passed. Life didn't return to what it was, and I didn't want it to. I didn't chase new projects. I didn't look for the next big scandal to expose. Instead, I started listening. Not just to others, but to myself. I realized that I no longer needed to constantly explain who I was or what I'd been through. People either knew or didn't need to. I began studying again, reading books I hadn't touched in years, learning things not because they'd make good content, but because they filled me. I spent more time offline. I reconnected with people I had ignored. I walked without filming. I thought without tweeting. I felt for the first time like a full human, not just a narrative. Some old followers still check in. Some quietly drifted away. And that's okay. I don't need to hold anyone. The ones who stayed don't see me as a case or a survivor. Just as a guy who got thrown into something too big and made it through. Sometimes I look back. Sometimes I rewatch the old videos, the raw files, the laughing faces. I don't feel bitterness. I don't feel pride either. I just feel distance. Like it happened to another version of me. One that had to break so this one could form. And sometimes, in the evening, I sit at the same desk where I once recorded my first confession. But now the camera stays off. The lights are dim. And I just sit, breathe, and let the silence remind me. I made it out, whole. And that's enough. Sometimes, when the noise is gone and the silence feels heavier than it should, I wonder if healing ever really ends, or if it just changes form. Life didn't suddenly become easier after everything was over. After the truth came out, after the court ruled in my favor, after the crowds quieted down and the spotlight moved on to something else. Someone else. Somewhere else. What happened was more subtle, more drawn out and less cinematic. It was waking up and realizing that no one was talking about me anymore, and instead of feeling abandoned or irrelevant, I felt a strange, cautious sense of peace. It was walking down the street without checking my reflection in every shop window, without rehearsing how I'd react if someone recognized me, without wondering how I looked from the outside. That was the real shift, not in how others saw me, but in how I stopped needing to be seen. At first, I didn't know what to do with the silence. My days used to be filled with alerts, comments, messages, threats, applause, hatred, sympathy, interviews, arguments, explanations. Then it all stopped. I didn't post anything for a while, and for the first time, no one asked why. No pressure, no outrage, no speculation, just stillness. I thought I would be afraid of it, that the quiet would feel like being forgotten. But it didn't. It felt like breathing underwater after realizing you could swim. I began to notice things I hadn't before. How light moved across my room during the day. How different my footsteps sounded on different streets. How many people walk around carrying invisible weight in their eyes. I started listening more. Not just to people, but to the world, and to myself. I spent weeks unlearning things I never realized I'd memorized, how to posture myself in front of a camera, how to speak with enough punch to land on a For You page, how to cut sentences short for virality, how to emote just enough pain to draw empathy without inviting mockery. It was all muscle memory, like habits that had rooted themselves into my personality. Even alone, I caught myself trying to be quotable, trying to phrase thoughts as if I were already being watched. It took time to strip that away. I had to relearn how to think without translating it into performance. I had to remember how to sit in a room with nothing but myself and not spiral into guilt for not being productive, not being useful, not being visible. At first I tried writing again. Just for me. Not content, not a post, not even something I intended to share. Just long, chaotic sentences spilling into a notebook. Sometimes angry, sometimes numb, sometimes exhausted, sometimes euphoric. I didn't read them back. I just let them exist. like echoes of all the versions of myself I had been: the clown, the target, the fighter, the boy. I started walking a lot, sometimes without destination, sometimes for hours, just letting the city move around me like a current I didn't have to resist. I didn't listen to music. I didn't record it. I didn't tell anyone. I just walked, and in that walking, something inside me began to settle. I didn't keep track of what happened to them, to Danya, to Vika, to Gleb. I stopped checking their names. Occasionally someone would bring them up in a comment or a message, but it didn't land the same way. They had become ghosts, not because they disappeared, but because I stopped carrying their shadows with me. Whatever they did next wasn't my responsibility. Whatever they regretted or denied or buried, it wasn't my burden anymore. I had told my truth. I had faced it fully. And I had left. That doesn't mean I didn't think about them. I did. But it was different now. Not from rage or hurt, but from a kind of detached curiosity, like looking at someone you used to know so intimately and now only recognize faintly from a dream. I wondered if they felt free. I wondered if they had moments like mine, where they stood in silence and questioned whether the path they chose was really theirs, or just the only one they believed they had. I didn't wish them punishment. I didn't wish them success. I wished them clarity, even if it came too late. Some platforms reached out to me after a while, offering to license my story, to turn it into a docuseries, a podcast, a short film. I declined most of them, not because I didn't think it was important, but because I didn't want to be someone else's version of myself again. I knew what that felt like, to have your pain sliced into digestible edits, to become an arc, a message, a symbol. I wasn't ashamed of the story I had lived through, but I wasn't interested in watching it be rewritten. I said yes to one project, a small podcast with no scripts, no ads, just conversation. The host didn't ask for drama, she just asked for honesty. And that felt like enough. I didn't rehearse, I didn't prepare, I just spoke, calmly, slowly, as if I were telling it for the first time, not to defend or justify, but to name it, so it could finally rest. People still ask what I do now. It's not easy to answer. I live, I read, I listen. I write things no one sees. I volunteer at a place where no one knows who I used to be. I mentor someone who reminds me of myself, and I don't tell them that. I just show up when they need someone to listen. That's enough. Some days I do nothing, and I don't hate myself for it. Some days I feel everything again, the betrayal, the humiliation, the fire in my chest. But now, it passes. It doesn't cling. It doesn't speak over me. It just moves through. I still keep that first video on my channel, the one where I sat on the floor and told the truth for the first time. I don't watch it. I don't reread the comments, but I don't delete it either. Because even though it came from a place of pain, it marked the beginning of something else, not a comeback, not revenge, but reclamation. Of my voice, my name, myself. When people ask me what the hardest part was, I don't say the court or the threats or the breakdowns. I say believing I was allowed to exist without being edited, that I didn't have to be likable to be real, that being enough didn't require applause, that healing wasn't linear, wasn't cinematic, wasn't viral, but was worth it anyway. I still dream sometimes about those first shoots, about the rooftop, about the moment I realized I had become the joke. But now, when I wake up, I don't reach for my phone. I just lie there, breathing, feeling the weight of my own body, still here, still intact. And in that stillness, I remember what I once thought was weakness. Silence, stillness, slowness. I now know it was strength all along, and it's mine. There comes a time, not marked by dates or headlines, but by a feeling, When something inside you stops being afraid of the past and starts asking what comes next. It was subtle, slow, and unexpected. One morning I woke up and didn't feel heavy. That might sound small, almost meaningless, but for someone who had grown used to waking up with a pressure in his chest, the kind that makes you hesitate to even open your eyes, it meant everything. I didn't feel the need to check anything. No inbox, no trends, no analytics. I just lay still, listening to the quiet hum of life outside my window, and realized that I wasn't bracing for anything. No threat, no scandal, no wave of noise crashing in. I was just here, present. And that was when I knew. I could speak again. Not because I had to. Not because anyone demanded it, but because something inside me wanted to. For real, without strategy, without expectation. I had spent so long navigating through noise that silence had become sacred. But now, the silence no longer needed to be protected. It could be shared, gently, on my terms. I didn't plan it. I didn't announce it. I just filmed. A single frame. My face. No background music. No text. Just me. And I said, "Hey, I'm still here." That was it. No monologue, no editing. Just that. I uploaded it and walked away from the screen. I didn't wait for reactions. I didn't care about the algorithm. I just put something of myself into the world without fear of how it would be received. And to my surprise, it was received with quiet. Not with a bang. Not with backlash. But with reflection. People commented things like, "This felt like a deep breath," and "We missed you, but we're glad you took your time." That was when I knew the audience had changed too, or maybe they had always been capable of this, but I had only ever shown them the version of me I thought they wanted. So I began again, not as a creator, not as a survivor, not as a symbol, but as someone who simply wanted to speak with no mask. I didn't tell stories about what had happened. That chapter was closed. Instead, I shared observations, things I noticed on long walks, strangers' conversations that stayed with me, old poems that meant more to me now than they did when I first read them, thoughts about regret, memory, softness, masculinity, honesty, and the texture of a day when you don't owe anything to anyone. The content didn't go viral. And that was the point. It was slow, intimate, a corner of the internet that didn't demand performance. And still, something interesting began to happen. People came, quietly, gently, not in floods, but in steady steps. They didn't come to witness drama or pain. They came for space. And they found it. The comment sections turned into conversations, not debates. People responded to each other with care, not correction. It felt like we were building something, not consuming it. I wasn't leading, I was participating. And in that I found something I had never truly known before. Community. It was different from audience. An audience watches, a community listens. It doesn't clap on cue. It doesn't click because it's told to. It breathes with you, challenges you, holds you when you're quiet, and doesn't walk away when there's nothing new to give. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to feed the platform. I wasn't pushing content. I was living out loud, softly, honestly, humanly. And with that shift came other changes. I started teaching workshops, small ones, offline at first. A friend asked if I'd help run a storytelling group for teenagers who had been through trauma or bullying. I hesitated. I didn't want to be the guy who went through something and now gives speeches. But it wasn't like that. I didn't stand in front of them and tell them how to heal. I just sat with them, listened, asked questions, told them what I wish someone had told me. That your story doesn't have to be pretty to be valid, and that you're not broken just because someone decided to make you look like a joke. I watched kids open up, slowly, then all at once. One by one, they stopped trying to sound smart or strong or unaffected. They spoke like people. Raw, contradictory, scared, brilliant. And I saw myself in every single one of them. Not because they had gone viral or been betrayed, but because they were all trying to find a way to be seen without being devoured. And that, I realized, was what all of us are trying to do. Some days I still feel the echo of everything that happened. A certain song, a smell, the flash of a headline, and I'm right back in it. But it doesn't drown me now. I've built something stronger than memory, perspective. Not forgetting, not rewriting, but understanding. That's what makes me free. Not the platform, not the redemption, but the choice, every day, to live without letting the worst moments define the rest of me. I walk differently now. I speak with more pauses. I laugh when I feel it, not when it's expected. I've learned to be boring, to have days that don't turn into stories, to sit in silence without trying to extract meaning from every second. And I've learned to be gentle, with myself and with others, because you never know what someone has survived just to sit across from you, breathing. They still ask sometimes, will you ever go back to making real content? And I smile, because this, the silence, the softness, the steady breath, is the most real thing I've ever made. Maybe it doesn't get clicks, maybe it's not trending, but it's mine. Entirely, finally, and that's more than enough.